Okay, so we've already looked at the geography of Constantinople and what's significant about that. Now I want to look at the politics and the culture. In terms of the politics, we see a long list of emperors that are going to rule over Constantinople while it exists as the Eastern Roman Empire, the eastern half of the Roman Empire. And then towards the end of this list, we start to see these are going to be the emperors who are going to rule over Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire, the eastern half, after the Western Roman Empire fell. The one we're going to talk about is named Justinian the Great. He rules from 527 to 565 AD, and he rules as both a political ruler but also a religious ruler. And on day 3, we're going to talk more about the religion of the Byzantine Empire. But here I just want to show you that the Byzantines kind of had a theocracy where you have a ruler ruling both over politics and religion, kind of like the pharaohs in Egypt. He's also going to be married to one of the most powerful women in history named Empress Theodora. She's going to help him pass laws, build churches. At one point, she's going to tell him to toughen up and face his people. So she's a really, really cool leader. That's Theodora right there. Justinian had 4 major goals. He wanted to reconquer Roman territory in the West. He wanted to reorganize Roman laws. He wanted to expand trade, and he wanted to glorify the city of Constantinople. So we'll talk about goal 1. Justinian was fairly successful in this goal. His legions went to the western half of the Roman Empire to try to fight back against those Germanic tribes that caused the fall of the western half of Rome. And Justinian's military was successful in taking northern Africa, the entire Italian peninsula, and southern Spain back from the Germanic tribes. He also is able to defeat a new Persian empire that was on their eastern border. And that becomes significant because it really puts Justinian and the Byzantine Empire on the map of powerful regions of the world. The conquests, however, were costly in terms of money, in terms of manpower. A lot of people died in his conquests, but he's famously known for bringing the empire to its greatest extent. So if you look here in the orange, this is the original eastern half of the Roman Empire that is now considered the Byzantine Empire. They had Greece, Anatolia, this region like Syria, Jerusalem, and Egypt. Justinian's legions are going to go back to the west, and they're going to reconquer northern Africa, especially Carthage, southern Spain, and the Italian peninsula, including the islands of Corsica, Sardinia, and Sicily. The regions they're going to be missing are Spain, Gaul, and Britannia. They do not successfully get those regions back. His second goal is to reform Roman law, specifically the 12 tables. They had become too numerous. There were too many laws. A lot of the laws repeated themselves. A lot of the laws weren't even applicable or they didn't apply to Byzantine society. So he hired people to look at those laws, catalog them, and completely reorganize them. And when they were done, they created a whole new law code called the Code of Justinian, or Justinian's Code. They reorganized the Roman laws. They kept certain things like innocent until proven guilty, trial by jury. They had laws about marriage, slavery, property, crime. And then because of Theodora, they added a few laws on women's rights. And then his law code is going to go on to influence future law codes in Europe, which then even gets passed to the United States. So we technically were influenced by Justinian's code, but we have to remember that Justinian's code was influenced by Roman laws, the 12 tables. His third goal is to expand trade, which is easy for them because they were a link between the Eastern and the Western world. A lot of goods came through Constantinople from the Silk Road all the way from China, and then they were brought over to Europe from Constantinople. So there's things going through Constantinople like Persian carpets, Chinese silks. They're going to all pass through Constantinople and on to Western Europe. And because of this, Constantinople is going to become incredibly rich. His last goal is to glorify Constantinople, and you do this through a couple different ways. He did it through military expansion. A lot of people knew Constantinople because of that. He also brought in a lot of trade, which made them rich. But he wanted to do a lot of cultural things to leave his mark on Constantinople. So he launches a really big building program. He rebuilds a lot of fortifications around Constantinople to protect them. And then he enlarges his palace. He builds churches, he builds baths for socialization and cleanliness, he builds aqueducts for drinking water, law courts, schools, and even hospitals. So you can see that he builds things for himself, for his people, and for Christianity. When all of his projects were done, Constantinople was known as the most magnificent city in the world. And you can see just from the buildings that are there, people still go to visit today to see a lot of the buildings that were created during his reign. So here's an example of where you see a lot of his building projects, and then you also see a lot of influence from Greece and Rome. You see the domes, you see arches. If you look closely, you can see columns, more arches here. Then this almost looks like a forum, like a city center like Rome had. So you can see the influence that he brought, but then you also see the new emphasis on Christianity. You see a lot of crosses here. You see that this is a church. So you see a mixture of those two influences. And that really brings us to his main building project. There's going to be a revolt in Constantinople when he is the leader. And that revolt, he reacts pretty strongly to it. And one of the main churches in Constantinople is burned down. And he, from the ashes, builds up this new church called the Hagia Sophia. And it becomes his crowning glory. And Hagia Sophia just means holy wisdom, the Church of Holy Wisdom. And the most famous part of the church is a 180-foot dome that people were just in awe of, both from the outside and the inside. And the church is going to show how wealthy and powerful the Byzantine Empire really is. And then it's also going to show the theocracy, how the emperor was so interested in Christianity as well and put a lot of money into building this church. The Byzantine Empire, Constantinople, is eventually going to be taken over by a group of Islamic invaders called the Ottoman Turks. They're going to take over Constantinople, and they're going to fall in love with this church. And what they do is they transition the church from being a Christian church to an Islamic mosque, which is a place of worship for Muslims. And so in 1453, the Hagia Sophia becomes a mosque. And today you can go visit it, and it's a museum. So if you look here, the original structure was a church built by Justinian and his construction workers. And then here you see these towers. These were not added on until the Ottoman Turks came in. These are called minarets, and they are towers used for Muslim prayer. So that's added on in around 1453. Here's the inside of the Hagia Sophia. So a lot of the decor that you're looking at is decor that the Islamic invaders added, the Ottoman Turks added. But then you see the original structure of the church. You see the influence of columns and arches and then the famous dome. People said when they stood inside the church with all the light coming in, it seemed like God's presence was just flooding in the building at you, and you felt his presence in there. And then if you look here, you can still see today some mosaics that were built or that were done inside of the Hagia Sophia. You'll see that video on an Ed puzzle. So if you look here at the entire city of Constantinople, you see the importance of the Hagia Sophia because it's added right there, right by their downtown, and right by the Imperial Palace. So if you look closer at the downtown that he built, one of the most fun and exciting things that they built in the Byzantine Empire was something called the Hippodrome, and it's where they had their chariot races. They don't do gladiator fights anymore because it's against Christian belief, but you still have these chariot races. And at one of the chariot races, there was a horrible revolt that cornered Justinian into his palace. His wife Theodora told him, "You need to go tell these people who's who." And unfortunately, he sends his army out and kills 30,000 men who were rebelling. But from this, he's going to, assert his power and then rebuild parts of Constantinople. So this is called the Nika Revolt. In terms of culture, there's just a few pieces or types of artwork that I need to tell you guys about. Byzantine art and architecture is really influenced by two things: Greco-Roman culture and Christianity. So you see a mixture of both in Byzantine art. A new type of artwork called an icon is created, and it's going to cause a bit of controversy later on, and we'll talk about that in day 3. Icons are just religious paintings depicting Jesus, Virgin Mary, any saint, or a cross, and they're used during worship. There's going to be an argument later on about whether they should be used, because are you worshiping the picture more or are you worshiping the subject of the picture? So those are icons. And then you have a type of artwork called a mosaic that you're going to see a video on. A mosaic is where you create a piece of art, but you don't paint on like plaster or anything. You take small pieces of stone or tile or glass and you place them specifically to create an image based on the colors of the different pieces. So here's an example of a mosaic, and here's an example of an icon, a painting portraying Virgin Mary and Jesus. Here's a famous depiction of an icon that was in the Hagia Sophia with the Virgin Mary and Jesus Christ. And then here's a famous mosaic. It's blurry, so you can't really see all the small pieces, but this is a mosaic of Jesus Christ. Finally, in terms of education, the Byzantines are really going to continue on with Greco-Roman culture. They're going to use Greek because Greece, the location of Greece, is within the Byzantine Empire. They're going to start using Greek more than Latin. So Latin starts to die out a little bit when the West falls. Then we're going to talk about the Greek Orthodox Church opening up schools for people to go study, and they're mainly going to be studying Greco-Roman classics. They're going to be studying things like Plato and Herodotus and Homer. And these scholars are going to work. They're actually going to handwrite a lot of those old classical texts and put them into these massive libraries where the Greco-Roman culture was preserved because of the Byzantine Empire. We have to kind of thank them for preserving a lot of these old classic texts and keeping them alive when the Western Roman Empire fell. And they do this in their libraries that they build. Last thing I want to do is I want to look at this famous mosaic of Justinian. If you look at the center, Justinian is in the center of this mosaic. And this was done to show that he's in the center of society. He has absolute control and absolute power. If you look more closely at what he's wearing a crown on his head to signify his political power, but then the circle around his head represents a halo, which represents his religious power in the Byzantine Empire. Then if you go over here to the left, you see his soldiers. His soldiers represent the fact that the Byzantine Empire is going to expand, they're going to conquer, they're going to be protected. Then you have different officials. You have officials that are dealing with law and religious officials. And we know that law was incredibly important for Justinian with his Justinian's Code. And then you see the Christian officials. You see this is most likely a Bible. Here we have a cross. And this is a figure that we're going to talk about more on day 3. This is someone called a patriarch, who's going to be the religious leader for the Byzantine Empire, who really works and answers to Justinian. So this mosaic right here really exemplifies Justinian's goals and his reign. And then his wife, Theodora, had a mosaic that mirrored his as well, that shows a lot of her characteristics as a ruler. So we'll look at this more later in class, but for now you're going to watch some Ed puzzle videos to get more information.